I've always found it haunting how the smallest decisions can alter the course of everything. Consider Anthony White, a marine biology student. He ignored warning signs near a seal rookery, all for the allure of remote waves. That decision would tragically cost him his life. The summer of 2014 brought perfect weather to Surf Beach, California. Sunshine filtered through the morning mist, painting golden patterns on the glassy ocean surface. Anthony, 22, was exactly what you'd expect from a California marine biology student, especially given his passion for surfing. He had been surfing for 8 years, and his friends described him as a perfect blend of fearless adventure and deep respect for ocean life. I always admired that balance in people. Anthony was known for his infectious enthusiasm and tendency to seek out remote breaks. Yet, he was also methodical, always researching surf spots and ocean conditions before paddling out. They had spent weeks planning this solo dawn patrol session. This morning adventure was meant to be the perfect combination of his two passions, surfing and marine biology. The college student had arrived at Surf Beach just as the sun was rising, spending his first hour checking conditions and waxing his board at the remote location. But Anthony had been restless, telling other early morning surfers that the real waves were beyond the crowded spots, despite the area being adjacent to a massive seal rookery at Point Conception. On that fateful morning, Anthony set out early, carrying his 6'2" shortboard and minimal safety gear. He had signed the beach access log indicating he planned to surf the main break. But somewhere along the way, Anthony spotted what looked like perfect waves breaking further offshore. Despite the prominent warning signs about marine life in the area, Anthony paddled out 150 yards from shore to position himself in the lineup. The area was beautiful, too beautiful to resist, with seals barking in the distance and crystal clear water revealing the sandy bottom below. While setting up for the perfect wave, Anthony suddenly noticed something that should have alarmed him. The water was unusually quiet, with no other surfers in sight, and the seals had stopped their constant chatter. But he was so focused on catching the wave of the day that Anthony ignored these warning signs. Finally, Anthony had positioned himself perfectly in the lineup and was sitting on his board, legs dangling in the water. Then, suddenly, a terrifying silence fell over the ocean. Out of nowhere, there it was, a massive great white shark emerging from the depths, a mere 20 feet below where Anthony was sitting. What Anthony didn't realize was that he had entered the domain of one of nature's most efficient predators. Great whites are living fossils that have remained virtually unchanged for millions of years. Their torpedo-shaped bodies are perfectly designed for explosive attacks. These apex predators can detect blood from up to 500 yards away and sense the electrical impulses of a beating heart from several meters distance. When hunting, great whites approach from the depths in explosive bursts of speed, exceeding 35 miles per hour, using the element of surprise to deliver devastating attacks with bite forces reaching up to 4,000 pounds per square inch. Anthony reacted instantly, but there was nowhere to run. The massive predator struck from directly below, covering the distance between them in a split second. Anthony managed to see the shark's massive form just before impact, but the attack came with such explosive force that both he and his surfboard were launched into the air. The sound of Anthony's screams cut through the morning silence as the shark's jaws clamped down on his torso. He fought desperately, punching at the predator's snout as it held him in its powerful grip, the massive head shaking violently as razor-sharp teeth sliced through flesh and bone. The great white released Anthony after several seconds, typical behavior for these predators when encountering unfamiliar prey. But the damage was already catastrophic. Blood immediately began clouding the pristine water as Anthony, despite his severe injuries, began paddling frantically toward shore on his damaged board. The shark circled below, following the blood trail but maintaining its distance, waiting to see if this strange prey would weaken enough to approach safely. Anthony managed to cover nearly half the distance to shore, his movements becoming weaker and more erratic as blood loss and shock overwhelmed his system. A jogger on the beach heard Anthony's desperate screams and immediately called for help. But the remote location meant rescue was still minutes away. By the time lifeguards arrived, Anthony had disappeared beneath the surface, the ocean swallowing him whole. 2 hours later, Anthony's mangled surfboard washed ashore, bearing the unmistakable crescent-shaped bite marks of a great white shark. The massive gouges told the story of an encounter with one of nature's most efficient predators. Anthony's body was never recovered, despite extensive search efforts. The university established a memorial scholarship in his name, and Surf Beach was temporarily closed while marine biologists studied great white activity in the area. The attack led to enhanced warning systems and additional safety briefings for surfers. As the sun set over the California coastline, the memory of Anthony White served as a stark reminder. The ocean is unforgiving. I've always felt a deep respect, and perhaps a touch of fear, for its power. You can calculate the movements of a great white, anticipate its precision, but sometimes the real danger lies where you least expect it. On the morning of September 3, 2015, Galveston Bay, Texas was picture perfect. A brilliant blue sky, just enough breeze, ideal for fishing. David Walter, a 26-year-old charter boat owner, was taking 4 tourists from Dallas out for the fishing trip of their dreams. He was a first-generation immigrant who had built his business from the ground up. People loved his enthusiasm and his knack for finding fish. He was methodical, friends said, always double-checking his equipment, obsessed with giving his customers the perfect experience. These Dallas tourists were celebrating a bachelor party, and David had promised them action near the Galveston jetties. They spent the morning pulling in red snapper and speckled trout, the cooler filling with their catch. David navigated to his favorite spot, just a mile offshore, where the depth dropped to 25 feet. It attracted schools of bait fish and the predators that hunted them. The tourists were having the time of their lives, already talking about another trip. Then, disaster. The boat's engine coughed, sputtered, and died. They were drifting in the strong Gulf current toward the shipping channel. David quickly diagnosed the problem, a clogged fuel filter, usually a simple fix. But as he worked, the anchor began dragging in the current. The situation was becoming dangerous. Local captains had warned about unusual activity in the area, but such warnings were common in Texas waters. The water was murky after recent storms, making it hard to see what might be lurking beneath the surface. David had fished these waters for years without incident, and he reasoned that this popular spot would be safe, with other boats nearby. His clients were growing nervous, so David made a fateful decision. He stripped down and dove overboard to manually reset the anchor, hoping to stabilize their position while he fixed the engine. He didn't know he had entered the hunting grounds of one of the Gulf's most dangerous predators, the bull shark. They are among the most adaptable killers in the ocean, at home in both salt water and fresh water. They have specialized kidneys that allow them to regulate salt levels, enabling them to swim far up rivers and into freshwater lakes where other sharks can't survive. They can appear virtually anywhere there's water, from the open ocean to golf course ponds miles inland. Bull sharks are aggressive, willing to investigate anything in their territory. They're responsible for more unprovoked attacks on humans than any other species except great whites. They have a bite force of 1,350 lbs per square inch and electroreceptors that can detect electrical fields from meters away. They employ a relentless bite and release pattern, striking multiple times with the tenacity of a pit bull until their prey stops moving. David worked underwater to free the stuck anchor, but the current was stronger than expected. The anchor was wedged in debris. A 7-foot bull shark had been patrolling the fishing grounds for hours, drawn by the chum slick from David's successful charter. Its incredibly acute senses detected the electrical fields generated by David's rapidly beating heart and the scent of blood from hundreds of yards away. What happened next occurred with shocking speed. David never saw the shark coming through the murky water. It struck from behind, its massive jaws clamping down on his leg with crushing force before immediately releasing and circling for another attack. The impact was so violent that David's clients heard his muffled scream through the water. David fought desperately to reach the surface, but the bull shark continued its relentless assault. True to its species' aggressive nature, the predator struck again and again, each bite tearing away more flesh. The shark's persistence was terrifying. Once committed to an attack, bull sharks rarely give up, continuing until their prey stops moving. The multiple attacks created a feeding frenzy mentality, and the murky water became a churning mass of blood and violence. David's clients watched in horror as the water around their boat turned red. They screamed for help and radioed the Coast Guard, but David had already disappeared beneath the surface, overwhelmed by the bull shark's relentless assault. The Coast Guard arrived nearly an hour later, finding only David's torn shorts floating in blood-stained water. The bull shark had vanished into the murky depths, leaving behind only traumatic memories for 4 witnesses. There's a story they tell in every boating safety course along the Texas coast, a cautionary tale about the Gulf's bull sharks that hunt in murky shallows. Death comes without warning there. But thousands of miles away, in the crystal-clear waters of Hawaii, another predator has earned the most terrifying nickname in the ocean. This time, the attack would happen under cover of darkness, where even paradise becomes a hunting ground. The evening of April 22, 2016 brought perfect conditions to the remote coastline near Hana, Maui. A gentle trade wind rustled through the palm trees as the sun painted the sky in brilliant tropical colors. Christian Smith, 24, couldn't have asked for better conditions for his solo fishing adventure at one of his secret spots along Maui's untouched coastline. Christian embodied the laid-back Hawaiian lifestyle that drew so many to the islands. With his easy smile and encyclopedic knowledge of hidden fishing spots, he had become a local favorite at the surf shop where he worked. Friends described him as fearless and independent, always venturing to remote locations that other anglers avoided, constantly searching for the perfect fishing experience that only the islands could provide. That evening, Christian loaded his truck with heavy tackle designed for the large predatory fish that hunted Hawaiian waters after dark. The location he'd chosen was breathtakingly beautiful, but completely isolated. A secluded beach accessible only by a rough dirt road winding through dense tropical vegetation. Christian arrived just as darkness was settling over the ocean. The spot was perfect. A protected cove with deep water close to shore, and a coral reef that attracted schools of bait fish during night hours. He set up his gear methodically, rigging the heavy equipment he'd need for the monsters that prowled these waters after sunset. As Christian waded into about 6 feet of crystal clear water to cast beyond the reef break, everything seemed perfect. The water was so clear he could see the white sand bottom, even in starlight. And he'd already landed 2 nice fish when disaster struck. Moving through the water to reposition for a better cast, Christian's foot slipped on wet volcanic rock. He fell hard against sharp coral formations, opening a deep gash on his leg. Blood immediately began streaming into the pristine water around him. Local Hawaiian fishermen had warned about increased predator activity during night hours, but Christian had fished these waters countless times. What he didn't know was that the remote location had become a hunting ground for one of the ocean's most dangerous predators. As Christian tried to assess his injury in the dim light, he realized the cut was deeper than expected. His splashing and the metallic scent of blood created the perfect storm of stimuli that trigger a predator's hunting instincts. Unknown to Christian, he had attracted the attention of Hawaii's apex predator. Tiger sharks are perfectly adapted for nighttime hunting in both shallow and deep waters, earning the nickname wastebasket of the sea, because they'll eat virtually anything. Their stomachs have contained license plates, tires, and even other sharks. These massive sharks can grow up to 18 feet long and possess an indiscriminate appetite that makes them particularly deadly during nighttime hours when they move into shallow water to hunt. Tiger sharks can detect blood from several hundred yards away, and their lateral line system senses the slightest vibrations in the water, making escape nearly impossible once they lock onto a target. Christian began wading toward shore, but his movements became increasingly erratic as blood loss affected his coordination. The coral cut was more serious than he'd thought, and the metallic scent drifting through the water was like ringing a dinner bell for every predator in the area. The 10-foot tiger shark had been patrolling the reef edge when Christian's blood trail reached its sensitive nostrils. Unlike more cautious reef sharks, Tiger sharks are known for their bold, reckless approach to anything in their territory, especially during nighttime hunting hours when they become most active. Christian never saw death coming through the dark water. The attack was sudden and devastating. The tiger shark struck from the side, its massive jaws clamping down on his injured leg with crushing force. The impact knocked Christian off his feet, sending him tumbling in the deeper water. The predator's attack was relentless and indiscriminate. Tiger sharks are known for their tenacious grip, often holding prey while using their muscular bodies to roll and tear. The shark maintained its grip while striking with its powerful tail, creating a whirlpool of violence. What makes tiger shark attacks particularly horrific is their feeding behavior. Once they taste blood, they enter a feeding frenzy, biting repeatedly until prey stops moving. Christian fought desperately, but the predator's grip was unbreakable, and each movement only intensified the attack. In the darkness, I've always found the ocean's indifference the most haunting thing about shark attacks. Christian's screams, they say, echoed across the empty coastline, but no one was there to hear them. The tiger shark's appetite was indiscriminate, making escape impossible. It's a stark reminder of the ocean's power. When morning came, they found Christian's truck and fishing gear, but Christian himself had vanished. The water, which had given him so much joy, had claimed him. A massive search ensued, helicopters and hundreds of volunteers. But it was 4 days later when they found his body 8 miles away. The Hawaiian community held a traditional blessing, and his surf shop colleagues created a memorial fund for ocean safety education. But it wasn't just the tiger sharks of Hawaii. Off the rugged northern California coast, the same species that took Anthony White was about to show that even professionals, those who've spent years in these waters, are never truly safe. November 8, 2017, brought crisp autumn conditions to Fort Ross in Northern California. The morning fog lifted, revealing that dramatic rocky coastline where Pacific swells crashed against ancient sea stacks. Ryan Walsh, 29, couldn't have asked for better diving weather. Calm seas and good visibility promised a profitable day harvesting abalone, those prized mollusks that command premium prices. Ryan embodied the dangerous profession of commercial abalone diving. His weathered hands and sun-damaged face told the story of 6 years spent in frigid Pacific waters, free diving to depths that would terrify recreational divers. Friends described him as methodical and safety-conscious, but also driven by an obsessive pursuit of the perfect abalone beds hidden in those rocky depths. That morning, Ryan launched his small boat with his dive partner Marcus, a younger diver who looked up to Ryan as a mentor. The two had worked together for 3 seasons, developing that wordless communication that comes from shared danger in one of California's most hazardous occupations. Ryan chose a productive rocky reef in 25 feet of water. The location was challenging: strong currents, kelp forests, and the ever-present danger of entanglement in abandoned fishing nets littering the bottom. As Ryan suited up in his thick wet suit, he felt that familiar mixture of excitement and apprehension. The water temperature was a bone-chilling 55 degrees, but Ryan had built a tolerance over years of expo. His dive bag contained an abalone iron, measuring gauge, and collection bag, the tools of his dangerous trade. The first few dives went perfectly. Ryan descended through the kelp canopy to the rocky bottom, where clusters of red abalone clung like living jewels. His experienced eye identified the legal specimens, and his practiced hands pried them loose with surgical precision. But on his seventh dive, disaster struck. Working to free a particularly large abalone, Ryan's fin became entangled in abandoned fishing nets. The nearly invisible monofilament wrapped around his leg like a spider's web, holding him against the rocky bottom as his air supply ran dangerously low. After a desperate struggle, Ryan managed to cut through enough netting to break free. He made an emergency ascent, lungs burning as he fought through the kelp toward sunlight. When he finally surfaced, he was exhausted, disoriented, and dangerously far from his boat. What Ryan didn't realize was that his distressed movements had attracted the attention of California's apex predator. Great whites are living fossils that have patrolled these waters for millions of years. Perfectly adapted to hunt in the kelp forest where seals and sea lions congregate. These massive sharks typically reach 12 to 16 feet and can weigh over 3,000 pounds. Their torpedo-shaped bodies are capable of explosive bursts exceeding 35 miles per hour, bursts that can launch them completely from the water. Their incredible sensory system allows them to detect electrical fields from several meters away and track blood trails from 500 yards distance. During autumn, mature great whites patrol northern California in greater numbers, following the migration patterns of their preferred prey. These sharks are incredibly intelligent, capable of learning and adapting hunting strategies, making them unpredictable and extremely dangerous to humans who venture into their territory. Marcus, watching from 300 yards away, immediately recognized something was wrong. Ryan floated motionless at the surface, clearly in distress. Marcus started the engine and raced toward his partner, but the distance seemed impossibly far. The 13-foot great white had been patrolling the kelp beds when it detected Ryan's emergency ascent. The shark's acute senses picked up the electrical impulses from his rapidly beating heart, the scent of abalone in his collection bag, and the erratic movements of a creature in distress, all triggers activating its predatory instincts. Ryan never saw the attack coming. The great white struck from below with devastating force, its massive jaws clamping down on his torso with a bite force reaching 4,000 pounds per square inch, slicing through his wet suit and into his vital organs. The shark's initial bite was exploratory, typical great white behavior with unfamiliar prey, but the damage was already catastrophic. The predator released Ryan and circled back, following the blood. I still remember the shock that rippled through the California abalone diving community. One moment, Ryan was there, a fellow diver. The next, he was gone, taken by a great white. His screams, they say, echoed across the water. He died from massive blood loss just 20 minutes after the attack. The beds at Fort Ross were temporarily closed, but while those great whites patrol California's kelp forests, another drama was unfolding hundreds of miles south, in Florida's warmer waters. This time, the attack would occur in crystal clear water, where every detail would be visible. It was August 14, 2013. The morning sun sparkled on the Atlantic as gentle swells rolled through Jupiter Inlet, Florida. Perfect conditions for the annual South Florida spearfishing tournament. Alex Paul, a 33-year-old construction foreman from Miami, was ready. Weekends were spent honing his breath-holding and perfecting his aim with spear guns. That morning, he joined 40 other competitors. The target species were cobia, kingfish, and grouper. Alex and his dive buddy Carlos headed to a reef in 30 feet of water. For 2 hours, Alex had moderate success, but then he spotted it, a massive cobia cruising the reef edge. He knew he'd found his target. His shot was perfect, but the wounded fish immediately took off. In his excitement, Alex became separated from Carlos, alone in an isolated section of the reef. The cobia's struggle created a significant blood trail. When Alex finally surfaced with his prize, he was bleeding from cuts and exhausted. He didn't realize that the combination of fish blood and his own blood had attracted one of Florida's most dangerous predators, bull sharks. They thrive in these waters, and they're not cautious around humans. Their incredible sensory system allows them to detect vibrations from struggling fish hundreds of yards away. This one, a 7-footer, had been patrolling the reef. The scent of blood reached its nostrils. It detected the electrical fields generated by both the struggling fish and Alex's rapidly beating heart. Alex saw the shark approaching. He tried releasing his catch, hoping to distract it. But bull sharks are opportunistic feeders. Multiple potential prey items only intensified its aggressive behavior. The water turned crimson in an instant. A bull shark, they would later determine, had struck Alex with crushing force. The attack, swift and brutal, severed major blood vessels. I can only imagine the desperation he felt, punching at the shark's snout, trying to reach his dive knife. But the bull shark's aggressive nature meant a relentless assault, striking again and again. Other divers, alerted by the commotion and spreading blood, raced toward him. They found him floating unconscious, his spear gun and wounded cobia drifting nearby. The shark had vanished, leaving behind only the devastating evidence of its attack. Despite immediate first aid and a Coast Guard helicopter evacuation, Alex died from massive blood loss during the 40-minute flight to the trauma center. The tournament was canceled, and the spearfishing community mourned one of their most respected members. In the wake of this tragedy, enhanced safety protocols were put in place for future tournaments. New requirements mandated closer proximity to dive buddies, and organizers began providing emergency response training. The association even established a memorial fund to promote safer diving practices. It's a somber reminder of the risks involved and the need for constant vigilance.